All right. Well, welcome back. Here we are again, the Jim and Al Show. Payroll presents. I know you can get the money, but can you spend the money?
Not arguing that, well, not arguing that with you. I know they can borrow the money, but can they forgive the money? These
I said that? If I had said that, I'd have known I said that. Wait a minute.
We're dating ourselves. Half these people probably don't even remember that movie.
Well, they're going to get a refresher right now. So before we begin, enjoy this little clip.
I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? Harry. Yeah, Harry, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you, Harry. Harry. Yeah, Harry, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that with you. Harry, I am not arguing that with you. Who said that? I didn't say that. If I said that, I would have been wrong. Maybe. I'm not arguing that with you. Yeah, Harry, I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that with you. I am not arguing that with you. I am not arguing that with you. Who told you that? No, I told you that. Me. What? Maybe.
And there we have it. Boy, does this feel like that. The amount of calls, emails, texts, requests with as little information as exists today on how this all goes. Wow. We know you can get the money, but can you spend the money? Because we're not arguing that with anybody, right, Jimmy?
We are not. We are arguing with ourselves over the rules that we are reading because we know you can borrow the money, but can you get the money forgiven based on the rules that are what they are? I feel like I'm in a Donald Rumsfeld defense briefing saying, we don't know what we don't know, and how can we know what we don't know when we don't know the unknown?
And there we have it. So for everyone that's joined us and everybody that's watching, this is streaming live on Facebook as well. Welcome once again. We're going to do a quick overview of the Payroll Protection Program loan qualifications and requirements. And then we're going to actually get into some live examples with real companies. All names have been removed. And preface this by saying we know you can get it. We know you can get it forgiven. We just don't have a clue as to exactly how. Not necessarily true. We have some idea.
And I think we got to preface that we don't know if you can get it. We think you can get it because the fund has been replenished.
Right.
However, we have no idea. I talked to the banker today at Bank of America, and in the initial round, they had 400,000 people that had applied.
That's a lot of people.
She didn't have the exact numbers on how many had gotten approved in the first round, but I mean, if you just took the top 5 major banks nationwide, and I mean, that's 2 million people out there that are businesses that are applying. And if your average loan is say $25,000, it just doesn't take a whole lot of time to
Beat that up.
349 billion sounds like a lot until you start dividing it out. So and right now, I think it's what 320 is, I think the number 310, 320 is the second round of funding. And depending on what you listen to, some people are saying some the banks are, you won't get it. It's already been allocated, and other ones are. I do know some of the banks that we talked to are taking applications, and people are still applying. So go back to the thing. We know you can apply for it. We just don't know if you can get it.
Not arguing that.
Nobody's arguing that with us.
Not arguing that with you. So what? Who can qualify for the PPP loan? If you haven't already done it, as Jim said, listen. I think I'll speak for the both of us on this. It's likely if you haven't had your application put in by now, and you put one in now, you probably are not going to get in line to actually get it from even this round of funding. The first one took 11 days to get wiped out. This one's probably going to be a little bit less. But what do you need?
I think this one will actually probably be a lot less. I think it took 11 days. I think 11 days because you had 4 major banks that did not start doing anything until the 3rd and 4th days because of questions.
Well, and there you have it.
Now, if nothing has changed, we're still stuck with the rules that we have. Everybody's coming out of the gate at the same time. So I will be surprised. I believe Trump's signing it today, so it will probably go into effect. My guess would be on Monday, maybe Tuesday. I would say by Friday next week, if we're doing this, we'll be talking about what we think of phase 4 of funding will look like.
Well, so let's go over who can get it. Small business with 500 employees or less. You obviously have to pay those employees wages. If you're a Schedule C filer, self-employed, you've been paying the self-employment part of the tax, which really seems to be the caveat to all of that. And here's the interesting one there, Jimmy. I like saying Jimmy because it was Henry. What do you take this particular sentence in everybody's application to really, truly mean? You have to certify in good faith that it's necessary to support your ongoing operations. What do you think of that?
I think that is the ambiguous line that House and Senate oversight committees are going to utilize to investigate this. I think it is the enforcement line for the enforcement agencies, whoever may ultimately be handling this, from Justice Department on down, to basically say that these are not loans and that you didn't certify, you didn't exactly prove that you needed these for your business. And I think it's definitely a potential mechanism to prevent the grant status. I know several senators and that on several of the shows that I've watched the news channels have said this is the line that they're going to use to enforce it. I guess as an example, I would say to somebody, if you want a real life example, would be my business. I do not believe that I could certify in good faith if I was to apply for one of these that I needed it. My business has not changed. It's only gotten busier, more things. My revenue streams fortunately have not been affected by this. I believe I would be a candidate to, if somebody wanted to look to prosecute by not certifying that, I think I would fall into that range. So I would be careful as to understanding what you are certifying. Read the documents, read the documents, read the documents.
Well, and I'm going to chime in on this part of it because there are certain businesses that are definitely have applied for the PPP and stand a reasonably good chance of getting it based on just pure documentation. However, certifying that I'm doing this in good faith to support my operations, like you, my business has actually done better during this pandemic than it has in a little while. People are a lot more sensitive to the money that's going out, so they're finding other ways to save money, and that they're finding TruPayroll a viable alternative to save that money. So we're increasing our customer count. So I could certainly sign off that I'm going to certify it. However, I think an audit can get triggered right then and there. And you're exactly right. It could forego the forgiveness status that you might otherwise enjoy. This is not free money. It's not like you can go apply, get it, and automatically get forgiven. That's going to be a very interesting piece to this puzzle.
I think that is going to be a line in the application of,
Right.
of applying for forgiveness. I think that is going to be a major criteria. And I think people are going to be having to prove
Totally agree.
financials and those type of things.
Be careful with that one. Okay, so let's move on. And again, that's not an all-inclusive list that we put in there. If you've got any questions about that, reach out to Jim.
And I'll direct you to Al.
I'm not arguing that with you. Okay, so what are the loan terms? One of the interesting changes I think that and it might not be a change, but something that really came into specific focus for us is that very last one that we have on our list. But it's going to be what? 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. And there are I have a little asterisk there for some of the qualifications, even of what that means. So if you're unsure of what goes in or what gets excluded, reach out to Jim or I or whoever you're using to make sure that you have that part correct. Max amount, 100,000 per employee cap. So owners, if you're more than that, or if you've got commission people and they're making more than $100,000, they're going to be capped right there. You may include different pay types. So vacation pay, sick pay, as long as that is not under the family paid leave and otherwise being taken care of through one of the other federal programs, then that pay is includable. Anything you want to talk about with that part right there, Jim?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is for it's probably more for the employers than the employees, is one of the things this doesn't include is the employer share of the federal taxes. It includes employee shares, state, local taxes.
Right.
So keep in mind, as an employer, for every $100,000 that you pay out, you're going to have roughly $7,650 of employer share of the federal taxes. That is not part that can be forgiven. It is not part that can be credited in one of the other federal plans. And I believe it is not part that can be deferred 50-50 over 20 and 21. 2020, 2021. So keep in mind that is something that
due and payable.
And so if you're a business that's taking this loan and you're paying all your employees, but you may not necessarily be open for business, if you get a $200,000 or $300,000 loan, you're looking at $14,000, $21,000 in taxes that you are going to have to pay. And I can tell you firsthand, having dealt with this over and over and over and over, the IRS loves their civil penalties when it comes to payroll taxes and assessing them, and they will assess it quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Good point to make. All right, so our max loan amount is going to be $10 million. Of course, you're going to have a significant size payroll for that. If you have that kind of payroll, definitely see me. All right, for the things that you can use it for, Jim, want to cover that?
So you're going to be able to use for and there are going to be some percentages here, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit further, so I won't just go just a general overview. This is going to be for payroll costs, so the actual payroll itself and other various expenses, allowable expenses, rents, interest, utilities, and there are going to be some specific parameters that you are going to want to make sure in the percentages that you follow. Because if you go outside of those, there is a calculation already in hand to make this a loan and part that's not forgivable. While the rules to this and what exactly applies are about as trustworthy as a blind person driving a car. However, the rules that are in place to knock out your grant forgiveness appear to be extremely crystal clear as to how and what and where and when they're going to do it. And it's sort of like going into a minefield. And okay, if you want to get to the other side, make sure you don't step on a landmine, and good luck.
Okay, so now that we're scaring people, your covered expenses must be incurred by June 30th right now, which is an interesting deadline. We're fast approaching the 1st of May, and we're going to have our 8-week clock running. So presumably either that date is going to shift backwards, or they're going to run out of money again and not do another round of funding, so that the 8 weeks that you have to spend the money, which is the last point on here, it'd be interesting if somebody gets it sometime mid-May, what they're going to do with that. So as of right now, you've got to incur these expenses by June 30th.
One of the other things that I noticed we didn't include in here is for those that end up with either just taking this as a loan or doing that, you have 2 years to repay it.
Right.
So for somebody that gets $100,000 or $200,000, $300,000 loan, divide that by 24 and realize what your repayment is going to be. So that's why we can't emphasize enough and say it over and over and over. It's not a matter of if you can get the money. It's a matter of making sure you get it forgiven. And we've joked around with this with one of our favorite movies in Joe versus the Volcano, but it's for just that reason. Because if you screw this up, this could be a business killer loan, unless you're something so large that you can't.
I know get the money, but can you forgive the money?
Exactly.
Not arguing that way, right? It's just so. And that last point for here is you had to be in business before February 15th. So, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We did not put that in our slide part of the presentation. So.
And we got a question from Penny. I believe the interest rate is 1%, correct?
Correct, 1%. So it's cheap. It's
cheap money.
However, that repayment term, as Jim pointed out, 2 years. The end of, I mean, not even, right? Year and a half.
Cheap money, short duration.
Right. So
if
some of the examples we're going to see, I mean, if at any point that got determined to not qualify for forgiveness, it is a business killer, because you got to fund your normal cash flow plus that on
and the
top.
Rules are a little ambiguous as to if you get the 6-month deferral. What is that clock? Do you get a 6-month deferral and then 2 years, or does that 6 months come out of your 2-year repayment time period?
Yeah. So
so you could theoretically, if you got the deferment, you could potentially only have 18 months. So you get $180,000. It's $10,000 a month on top of everything else that you're going to try and recover.
So 2 things administratively, I should have covered this. If you're on the webinar and you'd like to ask a question, then put it in the chat. I did not enable the Q&A section. And then us as panelists make sure that we're sending it to all panelists and attendees, so for our answers. And then if somebody's watching live on Facebook, you might want to click over to join the Zoom webinar so that you can actually ask any questions, because we're not monitoring Facebook at the moment. Do we know what the penalties are going to be? As far as we're going to keep going, Penny, would you please explain what you are talking about as far as penalties go? And we can circle back around to that. But I think it's really important, this last one, I'm going to reiterate it. You have 8 weeks from the date you get the money to have it spent. And remind me, Jim, I want to come back around and talk about cash versus accrual.
Okay.
All right. Now you got the money. What do you do with the money? You approved. So we have a number of customers and clients that have been approved and have now gotten the funding. What can they use it for? How can we maneuver that next 8 weeks to ensure you're going to be eligible for that forgiveness? Because obviously nobody's doing this to end up with debt at the end of this.
And what I think I can reiterate from my clients that I got it, and I think I can speak for our mutual clients and probably even some of your payroll clients. This is the first time I've ever had clients that applied for a loan, got approved for a loan, and had 15-minute to 60-minute conversations with me about not wanting to take it. Realizing what the repayments could be, because when you get approved, it will give you a thing and it will tell you exactly what your payments in that are going to be if all of your loan is for some reason not forgiven. And I have not had one person that I've talked to that's gotten this, whether they're clients or just people in general knowing what I do, that say they can survive if they have to repay it, plus operate normally. So
right. So here's a general overview. Once you get the funding, you've got to use it within 8 weeks of the receipt. So if you got it today, the clock starts. If you got it 2 days ago, the clock started already. 75% of your loan must be spent on payroll costs. And so that's an actual interesting, we can get into a little bit of detail on what is included in payroll costs, but there's 2 criteria that go along with your payroll in that period of time. You must maintain a full-time employee level. So they're calling that FTE for short, full-time equivalent. And you have to maintain wage levels. So that 75% is in part how you're going to need to do that. And we're going to get into, I think, a little bit of a debate as to what that may actually mean as well. So Jim and I have some interesting perspectives on what that means. So if you spend 75%, you may use the remaining 25%, as we've already said, on mortgage, interest, and rent. That would be for your business. I've been asked already, can I use it for rent for my house? Can I use it for mortgage interest on my house? No, you may not. If you are a Schedule C working from home, Jim, what do you think about allocating? Because some of that might be allocated. Has that been?
I think it would follow Form 8829, home use of the office, and I think you would be limited to the percentages within the percentages. So whatever you took on your 8829 is home office use, I think you would be allowed 25% of that number. And for most people, that is just it in the scope of how this is going to work, probably an immaterial number.
Okay. And the last thing is on utilities. So I'm sorry for the what you may spend it on. Before we get to the staffing being back to full, the thing to note here is you can spend more of that money on payroll than just 75. That's not where that's just the minimum floor. Any thoughts on what that should look like for folks, Jim? What's your feeling?
So I think it's just the reading of the statute and just the spirit of the law, if you will. I think the more of this that goes to payroll in a percentage calculation, my personal belief is that you're going to have a much higher likelihood of government forgiveness. I think somebody that does 90% on payroll and 10% on the others, if that calculation works out, could theoretically have a better chance than 75. The whole idea behind this is payroll, 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 and payroll cost to the employee. The employer portion of it has sort of been left out at the federal level. Again, what minor things you have I think part of the reason the state ones are in there is because my guess is, and you could probably speak better to this, Al, this is what you do, most people will have met their state employer burdens of taxes if they have any, and the employees will probably have reached that, as they just tend to be a much smaller number or much smaller overall payroll gross amount.
Well, so that's a good point. Here in Florida, for sure, it's on the first 7,000 of wage. So at this point in time and year, there's a lot of people that are at that level. However, in some of the northern states, where some of what Penny has to deal with, the local tax is also includable as a payroll cost. So the things that are excluded are the federal unemployment, FICA, and Medicare. If you have any state or local taxes that are assessed against the employer, you can include those when it comes time for grant forgiveness. It's not part of the loan calculation as far as how much you can get. It is part of what can be forgiven. So at least there is a little bit of relief there. What other kind of payroll costs can be included? So if you have a 401k plan and you have employer contributions, it seems to me, and Jim, if you'll speak a little bit on that, it seems to me that that is includable in the forgiveness portion.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. The list appears to be much broader than what I thought it would have been in the initial portions of it. So, and some of the benefits that are employer-based to, again, they're all beneficial things to the employee. So anything that seems to be a benefit that was provided to the employee by the employer appears to be includable in the calculation.
And I should be a little bit more broad with that, not just 401ks, but if you have a retirement plan in place for your employees and you're contributing to that on a company level, not the deduction from their pay itself, because that's going to be part of the gross payroll. It's the extra part that the business would be contributing into that plan for employees. Health insurance costs for group coverage, that is also includable when you go for the grant forgiveness. So when we're looking at our examples, we actually are not going to have either one of those. However, those would be included or could be included when you go for the grant forgiveness. Any thoughts on the health insurance part?
I'm in agreement with that. I think that.
No, he's not arguing that with me.
I'm not arguing that. No, I am not.
We're on a roll today. Okay. Anything else on the eligibility here before we move on to a little bit more of the detail?
I'll say this on our fourth point, and I've seen this time and time again in some of the writings on this. It does, what exactly being restaffed by 6/30/2020 consists of seems to bear room for interpretation. And I have not seen anything where I could tell you, I could give you a clear answer or something that I would stand behind to say, yep, okay. In its initial reading, it sounded like, okay, as long as you restaff fully by 6/30/2020 on that date, you were good. Starting to read some of the other stuff and just some of the boards and some of the other interpretations of that. I can't solidly stand behind that, my initial interpretation of it at this point.
Well, it becomes really interesting, right? Because down in some of the southern states where tourist season may now be over, you're definitely not going to be able to get to a full staff as it was before all of this occurred. So it would seem, as Jim said, open to interpretation for what it may mean for you if you're perhaps in a northern state where you're getting tourist season is now coming into play for you. The staffing part's probably not as big of an issue, or some of the other stuff that we may be talking about. However, for those that it could, what does it mean to be fully staffed? So if you're a restaurant down in Florida per se, or in the coast of Georgia, and or over in the Texas and the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, and you're your season is likely over, and you cut your staff down normally. Jim, you think there's an argument to be made by those particular businesses that under the normal course of business, they are fully staffed, even though it's less than what it may have looked like during all of this?
I definitely think there's an argument to be made. We've had people that we talked to down here that are, I think in the generalist sense, have tried to, well, I'm seasonal, which yes, I agree. January till May is the busiest time here. Seasonal, by the IRS definition, is working 120 days a year or less. And so cutting staff, going things, if you have somebody that was working full-time hours in season, you keep them on the rest of the year, you're not a seasonal employee. Seasonal things are for farming and in certain types of industries where it's a set period of time every single year for a set number of days and no more. This is going to be another issue, I think, Al, that closely mirrors BP in the calculation of when you earned your wages and what you did. Remember that they had a formula that basically went from Key West all the way over to the tip of Texas and put everybody working on the same seasonal and the same amount. If somebody that's going to have to compare January 1 to April or February 28th of 2020, and then try and go May 1st to June 1st down here, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you get to that number and meet these percentages. Using the 2019 as an overall average will probably smooth, and using a phrase that everybody heard, we're going to flatten the curve a bit, because theoretically your overall total employees should, your monthly should account for that down. So I think that's going to be easier to get to than somebody that's trying to flatten it in an 8-week period at the busiest point of your season. I don't think that's a comparison period that you're going to want to use.
Okay, I think we're going to be able to kind of fly through these next. We've pretty much hit it. So again, forgiveness eligibility number 1. Use that loan within 8 weeks. Don't mess around with it. As soon as you get it, start figuring out what you're doing as far. And in fact, I would encourage you, if you're in the process of applying or getting this and have been approved and haven't gotten it yet, start figuring out your payroll costs now, so that you can actually start. And Jim, I'm going to ask you this one. We've had some conversations going back and forth with mutual customers. Those that are on either like a bi-weekly, bi-monthly, or monthly payroll, do you think they should stick to that, or should they go on a weekly payroll right now? What are your thoughts on that?
So I kind of have 2 arguments on that. One, I think for argument-wise and forgiveness, consistency in the way you did business prior to all this, I think gives you a better argument if you're having to show and defend stuff. If everything is in totality of full-time equivalent employees, wages and all that, then I don't think it really matters. If it's broken down weekly by an 8-week thing, even if you're running it, running the payroll by 2 weeks, I think you would have to break it down by week.
And we're going to get into why he's talking about that in just a little bit.
One of the other things I think we put out there, Al, and I don't know if this is not flattening the curve and more bending the rules.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on, so if you're somebody that has gotten approval for a PPP, but you haven't signed off and sent the stuff, and you're about to do a payroll, do you delay it? until you get funded and then
What a
make
great
up?
question, because I was going to wait until, and I think there's a good time to ask the question. That goes to a cash basis or an accrual basis, right? And so what does it mean to use this money within this 8-week period? What a great question to ask. On the risk of being in trouble, I personally would probably delay it if I knew that the money was coming in 4 days, let's say. If I was getting the money Monday, can't pay payroll Friday, I got to pay it Monday. So, and listen, there could be a very valid argument if I've signed off on the fact that this is part of the operational need of my business, then that money is necessary in order for me to actually survive into that next payroll. So if it were me, not giving out any kind of legal advice here, I'm not arguing that with anybody. That's a really good question. So what happens if I choose to do my math? I got $100,000 loan, which means roughly 75,000 of that. Well, I'm do the math. 75,000 has to be payroll, which leaves me $25,000 to do something else with. My rent
At least
$5,000 a month.
Use your terms correctly. At least 75%, not 75. At least. Not arguing
At least
75 with you.
Did I say that? If I'd have said that, I was wrong.
But yeah, in your math numbers, let's just. So
but I mean, if my rent then is $5,000, and I've got $25,000 left over, that in theory could be 5 months worth of rent. Can I pay that way? Can I prepay my rent that would extend outside of that 8-week period? Because if it's cash basis, then I can in fact take all those deductions in that period of time. If it's accrual basis, well, I've just shot myself in the foot, because I'm outside of the time frame in which that expense incurred. Thoughts? What have you read? What have you seen?
Well, I guess, on accrual, if you go to the going back to our principles in accounting days in college, it is as long as you're accruing no more than the calendar year's actual rental expense, it doesn't matter when you.
Well, what if it wasn't?
So
what if I had an 18-month lease and that's in theory, right?
Understood, but then you'd have if you go outside of the calendar year, you have to put prepaid rent and adjust that expense in the next calendar year. So just
I see what you're saying. A P&L versus a balance sheet number.
Yeah, so you could
be.
Could you? I mean, you could. If you got $5,000 a month and you've got $30,000 left over, you got $5,000 a month for rent coming up if you have no landlord abatement, and you're paying it in a calendar time. You utilized, if you meet the numbers, or the 25, let's say 25,000 of it, you paid rent for 5 months. You 75,000.
Here's an interesting distinction between the two kinds of expenses that we're talking about, because when it comes to the deductibility of payroll, it's not based upon the pay period. It's based upon when that's actually paid to the employee. And at the end of the year, you might have that accrual of happening if you're an accrual-based taxpayer. However, when it comes to the 941s, the 940s, and the W-2s, that's all based on the pay date. And that's why I, if it were me, I would push that to a few days from the normal pay date in order to kind of squeeze that in. When it comes to rent or utilities, because heck, I know I'm going to have utility bills. So, and I can average that out and say, that's $1,500 a month. I'm going to write that out and get all those paid. So now the conservative side of me comes in and says, there's no big reward without big risk. And I think this is probably a very little reward for a monumental risk.
The question is, I guess, does Big Brother decide that it is a prepaid expense or an actual expense?
I would absolutely err on the side of caution
And that one I would say, you know, we go by a phrase here, applying to a lot of things, is the juice worth the squeeze? And in this case, I think a lot of this could be a lot of effort, squeezing a dry orange for very little refreshment. I still go back to my thing, as much of this as you can apply and utilize towards payroll.
Yeah.
I would utilize that. I think on the arguments and positions that examples we were talking about, I think you have a much better chance of selling the rent, utilities, and that kind of thing if you use 10% of it and 90% of it went to pay.
You mean outside of a 2-month window of?
Yeah, I think you're,
Sure.
You know, I think that how this gets handled, I think, is going to be like dealing with an IRS agent. And how many times have we dealt where we have laid out the code or the IRS section? How many times have you and I disagreed on the interpretation of a section? I think you could end up with that here as well, depending on who's looking at what to forgive or not to forgive.
So, yeah.
Unless there's some specific model that comes out where these banks enter numbers in and it's calculated just as they're calculating your loan or that type of thing. So how many did you have? And if that's the case, then you damn well better know your increase or decrease in pay and your increase and decrease and reduction or keeping full-time equivalent employees. Because I think it's going to be something like that just in order to process all these. Because how do you process all these in, you know, they've got 60 days from the time you apply for forgiveness. And that's by statute, according to the law and the regs that have come out. So if you look at how many loan applications went in and how many they actually processed, with these ones that are going to be forgiven, can you process and make a determination in a period of time? And I just think there's going to have to be some automation to it in order to meet the deadline. Just kind of that is by nothing other than practicalities of various things that we've seen over the years in different programs and how they process stuff. You just can't process it if it's individual things in the time frame that they're going to have to do it. And either time frames are going to extend, which means terms are going to extend. And then the question becomes, is okay, you signed all this stuff and somebody changes the terms. Is that still now a valid contract because they've changed and extended the terms after you've signed and agreed? And now we go to contract law, which neither of us are lawyers, but I mean, there's just the ramifications of basically throwing a bowl of noodles at the wall and seeing which one sticks, which is essentially what this is, leaves a lot more questions than answers.
Well, we can't answer this one. We do know it's 75% payroll costs, minimum, at least, because we're not arguing that at all.
We are not.
What we are going to argue, maybe a little bit, is what does this mean? Full-time equivalent employees. So the debate rages on, and we're not going to have an answer for you. We're just going to have speculation. We do know for a fact that you're going to need to have a calculation that establishes what your full-time equivalency is in employees. The screen now shows what it looks like if you're dividing it by 40 hours. Well, there's some other legislation out there that suggests that that might be 30 hours. This particular legislation doesn't say a darn thing as to what that denominator is going to be. And the debate rages across firms, across professionals, across the internet. I have my thoughts. I think it's going to end up being 40 hours. Jim, what do you think?
That I agree. I think it's going to be 40. we talked about this earlier today. One of the pieces of legislation that Al and I were discussing earlier today and figuring out equivalence is when they passed Obamacare, ACA, in order to calculate full-time equivalent employees in order to get you over the 50 threshold where I think you were mandated to carry it for health insurance for employees. I believe it was 30.
30.
So there's arguments to be made. Obviously, I think the higher number works here because obviously the lower number is, the lower that number is, the more full-time equivalents you're going to have, and that may or may not necessarily be what a business needs. So I'm going to throw
in one more monkey into this wrench. One of the things I also read was if your normal work week is less than 40 hours and you pay somebody as a full-time employee for less than 40 hours worth of work, that becomes your denominator. So if your business is only open 35 hours a week and that you consider your employees to be full-time employees at 35 hours a week, that's your denominator. You're going to have to justify why you're going to change it up, down, or sideways. That would be my take on that particular piece of this. So be careful if you do have that situation going on.
Yeah, one of the things I think is just in the general terms to tell people to keep in mind, I think one of the things we saw today was, I think Florida allows you to work, 10 hours a day before it was a full day.
Yeah.
This is federal legislation, federal guidelines, federal. So whatever I believe, whatever guidelines they are going to use are going to be federally, regardless of what the state's position is and all that. So, and the consensus seems to be 40-hour work week, 52 weeks a year, 2,080 hours a work year.
We will be showing some examples of this.
That as well. So,
okay, so let's go on. What is it? I think this might be the bigger topic of debate. What does it mean to maintain your wage levels? So position number one. Well, let's see. We know we have to maintain levels. I'm not arguing that with you. But what wage levels? So one camp is, this is going to be analyzed on a person by employee basis for each pay period that you have. The other camp is going to be an aggregate at the end of 8 weeks. Do you have enough in wage levels to meet the criteria of having not dropped below 75%? In camp one, you're going to monitor that by employee, by their hourly rate. And if somebody's on salary, as long as that salary is the same. If it's going to be cumulative, well, that's a heck of a lot of an easier calculation in comparison to make. Sort of, because it's not 75% of the loan, it's 75% of normal wage levels. So, Mr. Tim, not arguing it, what do you think?
So, Al and I think on this one are in potentially differing camps. I am the aggregate guy for several reasons. Just one, that is my interpretation of the reading of the statutes and other articles and things that I have followed on this. And just to clarify, so we're throwing out 275s at you. So I will do it this way. You've got to use 75% of your total loan, PPP loan, on wages. Your wages in totality cannot be reduced by more than 25% of what they were prior to this or the comparison period. So when you heard us, we're kind of throwing 75 and 75 around. They're two different 75. So I think for this, it's 75% of the total loan is used for wages. The remaining, at least 75 is used for wages. The remaining can be used for other expenses. However, your overall wage levels cannot be 25%, more than 25% reduced to what they were prior to this going on. I think it is going to be aggregately, just because I don't think the brain power and manpower is going to be there at the level to analyze every single employee and thing that goes. That again is just, I am not saying I'm right, even though I'm pretty sure I am, because I'm pretty awesome, and Al's wrong.
I'm definitely arguing that with you.
But it's just my reading of it is, and again, this goes to the unclarity of the statute, and that I will, by saying this, I would probably be calculating it both ways. Obviously, the aggregate's easier going to do, but I would
Total
have
CYA, huh?
So yes.
Total CYA. So I'll explain the reason for why I'm in camp 1. And you bring up another point, which, as you were talking about it, I went, oh, well, that's how I would do it if I was the government. Because the forgiveness is going to start at the bank level, correct? They're the ones that we're going to have to apply for the grant through the bank, and the bank will end up submitting that to the SBA, presumably. We don't know that for sure, but that's, so we now have a frontline worker to do that, and that's at the bank. Who's the real work going to be delegated to? It's going to be on the employers to provide a packet of whatever detailed information is going to end up being required that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're qualified for that grant. It's not a difficult process, time consuming, not necessarily difficult, to go through employee by employee, paycheck by paycheck for this 8-week period and show that their rate of pay did not drop by more than 25%, if it dropped at all. If it didn't drop, then no harm, no foul. If it does, and it goes outside of that 25% and climbs, so their pay has dropped by more than that, and they're being now, their wage level is below that 75 threshold, or is now 28% or 30% less than what it was. Some have theorized, and this is where I sit, that your loan amount that would equate to the portion of pay that would exceed that 25% reduction, so 26 and on, or 74 and below, that's not going to be forgivable. It's not a hard comparison to make, and you'll see in just a couple of minutes how and why that is. For some of you watching, and otherwise that you're going to see, this could be a huge problem. And so that's what I sit on that side, because I think it's easy. It's very easy to audit. You have manpower is an issue. The bank is probably going to be the one to have to do it. And it provides, essentially, it provides the government with an opportunity to not forgive that loan, or a portion of it. And the more that they can not forgive, the better off it is for them. So that's one of the reasons why I'm on that side.
So one of the other reasons I'll just throw out that I'm on the aggregate side, because I believe in comparison, they're going to be able to look at quarterly tax forms. So they're going to be able to compare first quarter or previous quarter to everything here is going to happen in the second quarter on a 941. If you're looking to process quickly and just, on just a clear inspection, you can compare 941 quarterly filings and say, okay, yep, here's the total, here's the comparison period. It's not 25% less than what it was prior to this. And I think that is going to be, that's part of my reason that I think it's totality as opposed to individual. But I get and I understand where you're coming from. I think this is going to, I think for banks, they're going to want to get their cash back, and they're going to want to put their cash back to real things as opposed to having loans. People that will, I said, my personal opinion is I think there's this potential to have 50% of the businesses that get this go bankrupt. I said this earlier to you today. I think I would not be surprised if they had to come up with a new special chapter of bankruptcy just to deal with this kind of stuff, to allow the business to reorganize without going. And one of the other things that I said is because you can get this loan without a personal guarantee, what prevents me from making deals on all my other stuff, forming a new entity and just letting this one go.
It was a great point this morning and still is now. So we'll see how that plays out. Just looking at our time, so I want to get to a couple of the examples so that people can actually see what it is that we're talking about. And again, eligibility criteria number 3, up to 25% may be spent on that represents your mortgage interest for your business. Commercial,
Right.
You can pay your rent, and you've got your utilities. Again, I'm gonna side with Jim.
Yeah, that list is that 25% list is narrow.
Yeah, that's it. We're looking at it right there. That's what you can spend your money on. Don't use it for inventory. Don't use it for repairs and maintenance. Just don't. Make sure that your records are crystal clear and to the penny as to what, not the penny that's watching, but to your pennies in your pocket, that you can document every ounce of this. And so here's actually, I wanted to go into this really quick. Had a very interesting call with another local business owner. As a result of everything that's going on, their rent is abated. They're working from home. So now they got the PPP money. And so now he doesn't have enough in payroll to cover 2.5 times his average monthly payroll. So I'm gonna go right to Penny's question here. Can the wage levels go up, meaning raises for employees as frontline workers? So Jim, what do you think? This is a very interesting quandary for that particular person. Anybody that might be in this situation where I think you got to watch very carefully for doing raises on anybody that is a related party to the ownership of the business. If you got frontline workers that are not family.
So my take on this, Al, is if you were going to do that, I see nothing in there that prevents that. I've seen things that people have said. If you're getting close, you can bonus out. If it were me, I would be doing it uniformly. So everybody across the board goes up, especially for.
Would you do that though if you had 10 people on the front line and then 3 more were owners and they're not necessarily on the front line? Would you still raise their pay or just the people on the front line?
At the ownership level, I probably would do nothing. I would
keep it the same
to all the employees, non-ownership, not so that they have. Your argument is, listen, I kept my employees going. They ran, they operated, they did the things in unusual circumstances, and I think there's going to be an argument to be made for that. In the case where you had the one where his rent's been abated, the professional side of me says, well, you're just SOL. The practical business, let's make a deal. Monty Hall side of me says, go to your landlord. If you got to spend this money, have your abatement on the back end of something, abated down the road and pay. So
well, there's an interesting twist. I didn't even think about that one. That's creative financing right there, boy. All right. So
that's street loan justice 101.
That's actually a really good idea, I gotta say. I mean, wow. Yeah, right. You didn't hear that here.
That's just Jim Murray. Hey, that's Jeff Knight. Jeff Knight, guy that called in, we know. Jeff Knight said, making a suggestion.
Could he do that? Yes, absolutely. All right, and the last criteria here is the rehiring, the restaffing by the end of June back to full strength. And again, I think there's a challenge for certain businesses in certain parts of the country as to what that's going to mean, and what they're at the end of the day, we don't really know, because they haven't articulated this, as to whether or not it's going to be on the comparison period, or it's going to be before we entered into all of this. Are the way that you entered into the scenario, are you leaving it in the same way? So we don't have an answer for that, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah, there is no clear thing. I mean, it can be anything from get back to your normal average by 30, or if I had 20 employees and I only kept one on 6:30, can I bring the other 19 back and go, hey, I'm back to full staff? You know, you just don't know. And you know, one of the other things that we didn't cover, and we don't need to go into great detail here, but you've also got the issue of, if you got an employee that was making $400 and you got to spend this money and your employee is on unemployment for $875 a week, person ain't coming back. I don't blame them. I don't know how that works. I don't know if there's going to be an exception made, so the employer notifies that the person was able to get their job back. They chose not to and let unemployment come back after them. But then you still got to go out and you've either got to give raises or do whatever, increase hours and everything, so that you have the full-time employee equivalents that you were pre, and that you are making up so that you don't fall under the 25% comparison wages reduction from prior to this. So lots of things to think about. You know, obviously we're giving you an overview here for those of us that are for people out there that will see this or that are clients of ours. We'll work with you, but again, we'll stress, talk to your tax preparers, your payroll providers, and get professional
Legal professionals.
advice. Yeah. Do not try to, you know, to make these assumptions on your own. You are going to be better off. And I'm not advocating that my phone ring off the wall or that. And this is not a billable solicitation, or Al. It's just, there are some things that are worth paying for, and there are some things that aren't. You know, one of the lines that I use for my clients, the greatest part about this job, out of all the businesses and everything that I've had, you pay me whether you listen to me or not. And if you don't listen to me, then you usually have to pay me to fix what you should have listened to me the first time for, and it's sort of job security. But this is one where if you know you're trying to pass up a buck to save a dime, it could theoretically cost you your business. So.
Well, if we haven't confused him by now, I don't know what we can do to do that other than show a couple of examples. We've got a few here.
Oh, this is going to be, if we haven't lost you yet,
we're going to go for it right now.
This face is the top of the roller coaster. We're about to go down.
We're going down the other side. There we go. Example number 1. Here we go. Where we have the full year of 2019. I'm going to scroll that down. We've got it all. We've got an interesting category called car allowance. That's been removed. Total amount of payroll, divide by 12, average monthly. There is the theoretical loan amount. We're going to scroll that back up. So our theoretical loan amount, 75%. So that's what would have to be spent on payroll costs at a minimum, leaving that for the other allowable costs. So what do? We have a 52-week period, assumed a 40-hour-a-week full-time equivalency for a total of 2,080 hours. Employee number 1 worked 832 hours. We're going to divide 832 by the 2,080 to come up with a 0.4 full-time equivalent. We're going to do that for every employee for the total amount of hours worked in that year, no matter what classification or category. You'll note that in some of these examples, you're going to see 0 hours. Well, the category here is cash tip. For some, that's going to be okay. For others, not so much. We're going to show that in a minute. We're then going to figure out what the average hours are for that particular employee and the average hourly rate. So now it gets interesting. If you have anybody on commission or cash tips, you really do need to figure out what their hourly rate is going to be, particularly if Camp 1, me, is right, because you're going to need to know what 75% of that hourly rate is. So you cannot pay employee 3 less than $20.03 an hour. If you do, the amount that you pay that's less than that is potentially not forgivable. So, Jim, some inherent issues that you see so far. Anything?
Nothing that, yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't disagree with your logic or your calculation on on the position of Camp A. So I definitely would encourage people.
There's the number that they got to reach, right?
Yes.
12.71 in this particular example. So what that actually can translate into is we've got 12.71 full-time equivalent employees at 40 hours. That means this particular company is looking to have to pay 508 hours and 0.4 hours in payroll on a weekly basis. So if you go bi-weekly, it's 1,016.8. So you've got this kind of scale that you can, in theory, mess with. We'll show that in a minute. So this is the comparative of the base period of the entire year. So now we've seen some folks are out there suggesting, and there is definitely, this period is in the legislation, February 15th of 19 through June 30th of 19. So for this same company, the important piece to see is that's 12.19 full-time equivalents versus 12.71 for the entire year. So the number of employees actually full-time equivalents went down. And if you are seasonal, or if somehow you're able to actually use the 2020 period, which is January and February, you can see that the full-time equivalents actually jump up. So that's an 8-week period of 40 hours a week for 320 total. So that becomes very interesting to be careful of and watch out for. In this one, we've got 20 weeks, 40 hours, 800 total hours to compare to. So originally this week, I personally was under the impression that you had to pick either the short base period or of 2020 or of 2019. This morning, and as through last night, I think I've switched my mindset. I'm with Jim that I think we're going to have to compare for most people the entire calendar year. So again, in this particular example, if you're a TruPayroll customer, this is a under your reports tab, you can then go to payroll details, select your period as last year, and then there's another drop-down box where you can actually select summary by employee, and this is the report that will spit out for you.
Now, ideally, I think one of the, say, as a spreadsheet I was showing you a little bit earlier, ideally it would be nice if they gave you the option to use the short period or the comparison period and use both, and obviously coming out with letting pick whichever the better of the two is, as opposed to, well, do this one or do that one. And since there's nothing that I've read at this point that specifically prohibits that, and in seeing some of these, I wouldn't be surprised if some clarification came out that allows you to use either the shorter time period for this year or the 2019, whichever does less harm to you.
And good point. So let's go over a couple others, and I want to kind of come back to what you just said.
Okay.
Example number 2. This is an example of a real serious problem for some folks. I've highlighted a very important section called commissions. And you have employees that are 100% commissioned. Most of the payroll products that I'm aware of don't track the hours for that. So now you have a serious issue when it comes time to figure this out. Hopefully you've got some kind of point of sale system or some other something somewhere that is documenting when people are coming and going so that you can actually put a value in so that you can come to your full-time equivalents, because I can guarantee you this ain't gonna fly. Thoughts, Jim?
I think personally, I'd try to argue that my commission people are expected to work 40 hours a week.
So that's interesting. So let's just assume that for argument's sake, okay? So we're gonna get, and watch what happens by doing that. And I saved this for you, haha. We'll put in 2,080. Look what happens to the hourly rate. Drops to $1.80. So you gotta be careful about that happening, because obviously now you're saying that you just paid below minimum wage. Can you say Morgan & Morgan? For the people. So it's interesting, right? You get a full-time equivalent employee out of it, and you're admitting that you have an hourly rate that is well below minimum wage. So you really do need to know what this employee did, whether it was 150 hours, you know, was it 1,000 hours? What was it? So again, at like 1,000 hours for this particular example, you know, it's obviously that somebody didn't make $3,700 for the year as full-time. It's not even practical. So, you know, at 150, yeah, maybe that is right. I don't know. Just be very aware. Start running these numbers, whether you're using TruPayroll, whether you're using our competitors, ADP Paychecks, any of those other guys. That's potentially an issue. So look at it, be aware of it.
Yeah, and I think that is going to, I think that is going to be industry
specific.
So I think, you know, if you have somebody that's commissions, that's a hair salon, you're going to have to look at the number of people that person did.
Well, interesting, right? So that's not even a good, that won't be a good comparison, because somebody who's doing and we both can talk about this because our significant others do this for a living. It's somebody who's getting I'm even going to use a term, I'm going to get a attaboy, a balayage, which takes hours, versus somebody who's going in for a mentor.
So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. In the case of a hair salon, I think you'd have to look at the number of people that they did and what those services were and come up with an average time.
Another point, most of the salons, in fact, all of the salons that we actually do, this is not a salon, by the way, all of the salons that we do through payroll all have some computerized system where the stylists do check in and check out. So there is a way to calculate the number of hours that those folks did work. So thankfully for those folks, we don't track it in TruPayroll. However, they do have it. So for this particular place, they're going to have to go figure out whatever they're using.
I got homework.
What's that?
They got homework.
They got some homework.
Yeah, you got calculation time.
Get ahead of this is what is the point of that example for sure. Let's look at example number 3. We have obviously this one looks like it's a restaurant. So this one, this example is because we actually have somebody here who has, we're going to have 2 of these at least, where there's PPP money that has come in. So, and what I did, I left this way. If in fact 30 hours is the case, we'll see what happens when we change that to 40. It drops by 10 people in this specific example. So it's very interesting as to what happens. Looking at the short period, it's 46 people. looking at from 2019, 2020, it's almost 72 people, 71 and a half. And now we go look at what actually happened with the current payroll. So under this particular model, they had 42.6 full-time equivalents. I'm going to flip back to our year comparison. They're at 31. And if that happens to be the case here, they're at 41. They're fine. They have more than enough full-time equivalents. And again, same here. It's closer, right? Or actually, they'd be under if it was this short period. So in their particular case, the full year works out the absolute best. And as Jim said, we don't know whether or not you're going to be able to take your pick of a comparison period. That's not clear yet as to what you have to do. But looking at this particular payroll, we actually have the average hourly rate for this payroll run, and we have the 2019 rate as we calculated in that other tab. This person got 96% of their pay. This person got 92, well above the minimum required. And if in fact they get to use the 2019 period as their comparison, they're going to be, they'll have enough full-time equivalents, and they'll have plenty of payroll going out the door in order to have the forgiveness met. So they'll have about 8% left in order to pay any of the other eligible expenses. Thoughts on this example, Jim?
You know, just other than, I think.
Oh, there's a point I wanted to make too. Shall I do that?
I still go back to my thing. I don't see the 30-hour coming into play here.
I agree with you. I think it's going to end up being 40.
I think it's safe to tell everybody to assume 40 hours because that tends to be what most of the overtime rules and different types of things in that are. So
I want to highlight one thing here too. This particular company, again, as a restaurant, in most states, restaurants are highly limited to what they can do, take out and curbside stuff, delivery, where they created a specific hourly rate entitled COVID-19. You might want to consider doing that for anybody that's hourly, particularly somebody that might be getting cash tips. So, oh, well, we're not going to see it here because they put everybody, what's happening here is we're getting an average hourly rate for somebody, like here's a good one, where this person worked these number of hours. That was the total amount of earnings. So their average hourly rate at $35.58 an hour. I believe you and I looked at this when this particular employee was not, in fact, on the payroll. So I think we had to scroll down a little bit where, yeah. So as a wait staff, having an average hourly rate of over 2019, $21.96 got paid $20.20. You can see that this particular company had in mind to get about 92%. But you're going to have to average things out. So commissions and cash tips and non-hourly based pay is something that you got to consider in your calculation. And if you, so with that, this was my recommendation actually, is to put a COVID-19 category in there so that you could clearly identify when you take it to the bank or it goes in for SBA grant forgiveness, here's how we did this. Here's the comparisons, boom, lock tight, I qualify. And we created our special rate just for that. And in this case, the other thing I'll show was, I don't remember, let me go back to this really fast. Average hours worked was 4. I don't remember if that's the same person or not. In any event, you're going to want to take a look at average hours worked, looking at what the average hours a week were. And this is where you have, for lack of a better word, you got some leeway. So at 4.58, if I needed to really increase my full-time equivalencies, and this is the danger, maybe I pay this person at 7 hours. I know what I'm paying them. It bumps up my full-time equivalent, but it's going to reduce my hourlies. So I would fall below. So there is, I was talking about this earlier, there is a scale that can be utilized, particularly if you don't have the exact number of employees that you did before. Like Jim was saying, what happens when you can't rehire because they're on unemployment? That in theory would mean the employees you do have are going to work more, but you also have a set number of cash from the loan that you're able to actually use. So be very aware of your full-time hours, the equivalency, and your rate of pay. So have that available, have something like this available for yourself. Comments on that, Jim?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And one of the things too, we have had a couple of people that have gotten this, and I get the logic behind what they're saying. Oh, I don't want to pay this person this much, and they're sitting at home and doing nothing, or this or that. So I would just preface it by, and listen, I don't look at this as just a guy that does taxes and does numbers. I know what it was like to employ people and run businesses and do that kind of stuff. I would say look at it as a cost of doing business. Let's say you have $100,000 in payroll, you're going to have $7,650 in employee taxes if you have to cover and pay all that. Let's just say 20% of that is for overages of people that you didn't want to pay more. You're talking about trying to get money forgiven to keep your business viable. By not meeting the requirements, you could theoretically be putting yourself into a $4,000 or $5,000 a month loan payment for the next 2 years, because or higher because you didn't want to out a few grand. The cost of having all this is you need to look at it in the terms, whatever it takes to make sure that you meet the requirements to be forgiven. And on the other side of it is, look at it as and a lot of the business people that we've talked to have felt the same way. I always believed your business flies or dies on your staff. And there's probably a lot of times when they've had to take a little bit of a hit. And so, if you got to dig in a little bit and lose a little bit of money out of your pocket, one, to keep your business viable, to keep your things sustained, don't shortcut because you're passing up a buck to make a dime, because somebody might be getting a little bit more money than they otherwise would have under normal circumstances. They're not normal circumstances. You're trying to keep your business going. You're trying to keep your employees paid. And if your whole point behind this was, we had one of our clients come in and just basically made the comment, when you got 30, 40, 50 people on your payroll that rely on you, so what if that person gets an extra couple $100? I'm sure at some point somewhere they did something to earn it. And you know what? If they didn't, then you kept them too long anyway. Just my personal thought.
Spoken like a true former bar owner. So example number 4, real quick, was I wanted to show what it looked like for somebody that might be getting a commission that is, that's part of a base. There's a base pay plus the commission, so we have hours tracked and whatnot. That was just a simple one, and it's, you're going to calculate the full-time equivalents for that, and it's going to give you the rate. Again, this is coming down to, we have people that are over full-time equivalencies because we got overtime. So that just means they're going to have to pay every week. Again, you can look at this and say, how much do I need to pay? How many hours? So 824 hours a week have to go out the door. That's another way of looking at it. So be aware. Last example. Yikes, can't see it. Let me move it. Wrong thing. Yikes, that's one. Okay. Loading controls were in the way. And our last one is just a very, very straightforward business, nothing fancy, just some straight hourly and one salary person. And as you should see, that's the short period. Let's go back to here. So we have a head count. I wanted to actually, this is one of the things I wanted to show. There is 10 people on the payroll, but only 5.25 in full-time equivalencies. So it's not about head count at this point. It is about full-time equivalency. So unless they change that, this is what we're going to be going with. And again, we've got a payroll for, this was the second example, for payroll this week after having received PPP money. Their full-time equivalents were at 6.1, and comparing to, in fact, the only period that was bad was the 2019 short period. Otherwise, they were in good shape. So that was to show what that could look like just on a regular old, pretty straightforward, nothing crazy. So the more pay rates you have, the more differences in how you pay your employees. The calculation could get a little bit interesting. You're definitely going to need to make sure that you know how many hours that somebody did work and calculate their rate of pay, making sure not to fall below minimum wage, making sure not to fall below 75%, and making sure that you have your full-time equivalents on track. So with that said, I will answer one last question here from Penny. So thanks for all your questions, Penny. Good stuff. To stay within the 75% for payroll, and you give your frontline employees a raise, could you then take them back down after this is all over? That's a business decision for sure, first and foremost to me. What that's going to do to this process, I don't know. I don't have a straightforward, simple answer for you on that one. I think that my gut says if you can demonstrate that you were paying them for the additional risk for being on that front line and you gave them extra money for that, and anybody not on the front line wasn't receiving it, I think you have justification for that and bringing it back down afterwards. I think there's certainly an argument to be made as to why you did it, and whether or not the SBA and the bank is going to agree. I think your guess is as good as Jim and I's. Not as in Gemini, Jim and I. Sometimes we may act like twins. But
yeah, you know what, Alan, I think I'd have to agree with that. I think there's going to be grounds to be able to do that and do it with some justification. My own personal feeling on this is I think one of the benefits that everybody has that's applied for this and getting it, you're in an election year. So for the incumbent,
not to make this political.
Yeah. In
just
observations of it, you have an incumbent who has no great desire to try and run on having put millions of people out of work and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of small businesses out of business on loans that they took. And at the same time, keep in mind, so this, a lot of times in these, this isn't free money, okay? You are applying to borrow the money to run your business that you're going to be taxed on to repay. This isn't government money, it's your money. So it's not free money. It's not just coming out.
Let's clarify. this isn't taxable on your tax return.
Correct, but it is going to have to be
Repaid.
repaid by somebody, whether it's you, your kids, your grandkids, great grandkids.
Right.
So that would be the thing. And I don't think the banks or the SBA, the government, is going to have any great desire to put people out of businesses or make this so overly complicated that you don't have to pay back. On the other side, if you're on the other side of the political spectrum and your candidate's coming in and they're watching an incumbent create rules that are going to be detrimental to your survivability as a business and continue to be a going concern, my guess is you'll start to see statements that there will be retroactive looking at this. So that's one thing to just keep in mind. There's the potential to, if this drags out and things extend longer than that, you have a set of rules that could theoretically be completely changed if there is a shift in power or elections, whether it be House, Senate, or presidency. If there's a shift, historically, if the other side comes into power and total control, it's probably good. Probably not going to be great for big businesses and there's been a lot of abuse to this program. You guys have probably seen it on the news. I don't know how Ruth Chris classified as a small business. I understand they did it over the affiliate rules and blah, 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 and got $20 million. There's a lot of businesses being shamed. I personally don't believe a small business is 500 people.
Right.
If you're, Al's heard me say this, at my height, I had 589 people that worked for me. Obviously, they were all independent, different businesses, but it was cumulative. Small businesses are, one of our clients this the other day in here, maybe 100 max. I think the definition that they utilize has allowed, some abuses to the system, and people got money that shouldn't have gotten money that had, I don't believe publicly traded companies that qualify as small businesses that have other avenues to get money should be part of this program. I mean, at the end of the day, this program was designed for people like you, Al, people like me, people like our clients, and that truly small business people. The reality is most small businesses are probably under 50 people, maybe 75. So,
no argument
my
there.
thoughts.
My final parting thoughts on this will be something that I read this week as well, which had to do with a recap of the TARP program that occurred back in 2008, 2009, and what in fact what are you reaching for?
I was just, I'm going to give everybody just a little note to go out on, a little leg lamp for the cause.
I thought I was getting the no button.
Because,
No.
and as I told Al I would do, parts of this program just make you so angry.
So the final thought there is, there were years after the program ended where small business was receiving loans and the economic impact type packages like what we're seeing today. This could go on for a number of years of potential audit risk and clawbacks and reclassifications, recategorizations. Document everything you're doing. Set it aside, get it to the bank or the SBA or whatever this is going to look like when that comes out. Just have everything ready to go without question, without fail, all T's crossed, all I's dotted, and hopefully it'll be enough.
And I think I would just close on that out with that. Start doing your homework now. Start doing your preparation now. Get your documents together. We've seen this I've seen it just with taxes. People walk in the door and they throw up a bunch of paperwork and I need my tax return tomorrow. And again, you're talking about large sums of money, and you're talking about loans that are regulated by agencies and structure. Yep. So don't wait for the last minute on this. I think the benefit that you'll have in the forgiveness process, it's going to be simpler in scope of whoever's applying for it has been allocated money. So it's not going to be, oh my God, I'm applying for it, I don't get it. If you're applying for the forgiveness, you've gotten the money, so you're in in the queue,
Right.
but there's going to be guidelines to it, and you're going to want to follow them. And everything we've said, everything we've read, every people talk to, whether it's other business owners, other professionals, and that document, because you're going to need to prove this, and things are going to need to tie out. And at the end of the day, I still go back to the starting point, whether it's by employee, whether it's by anything, all of your numbers on your payroll reports that you generate or your system generates better tie out to your 941s and your taxing documents.
And if you're on TruPayroll, they will.
I was just going to say, I was going to throw a plug out to, TruPayroll. Makes it really simple. Listen, I could do all my own forms and filings and know exactly how to do it, and it's not worth my time. I've used TruPayroll for my own stuff since I've been down here doing this. So you want to document that kind of stuff and just dot all your I's, cross all your T's, because it's going to be on you. It's not going to be on on the bank. Yes, they're going to want to forgive it, but you're going to be doing the work. So, and I think, there's going to be more. We're going to be, I fully suspect that some of the stuff we told you is going to change. So understand, we're telling you what we know as we know it. Things are always subject to change. With government, things do change. If there's another package and this expands, or this one goes through, there still may be some things that come out with this one that we don't know about. The government is great at Friday and Saturday regulations that publish at about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So obviously if something changes, we will be back on to give you our new and updated information, but this is what we know as we know it right now. So, and once again, I will just say, we know you can apply for the loan, but can you get it forgiven?
I'm not arguing that with you.
These lights in here.
If my final thought will be, or my parting words will be, if you do enjoy what we provide to you, please share it and let everybody else know that Independent Accounting Office with Jim Murray is open and doing business, and TruPayroll is here open and doing business. If there's specific issues, questions, or comments or concerns that you want addressed, shoot us an email, get that over to us via text so that we can address it at our next outing.
Yeah, and I will also say, first and foremost, we want to get this out to everybody, whether they're clients of ours or not. And listen, if you're not a client of ours and you're working with somebody and they know something different, provide our contact information to them. We're by no means end all be all, and are always looking to collaborate with other professionals. And
wait. You have told me for freaking how many years now you're like omnipotent. How can you not know this now?
Listen. Not arguing that with you. All right.
Linda.
But yeah, we're always open to talking to other professionals as well, opinions to make sure we're on the right page, giving you guys the best advice that we can, and just getting other ideas and other aspects of it too. Somebody may interpret something completely different than us. We want to hear about it. And again, if you guys have questions with that, or we can be a help, reach out to us either by email or web pages or this, and please share this, just so that if it helps somebody else out, whether they're a client of ours or not, that's what we're looking to do. We're all in this together. So
this is going to be saved and put up onto YouTube, and right now it'll also be saved on the TruPayroll Facebook page, because we did stream this live tonight. So again, with that, everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy the next upcoming week. If you're getting the money, spend it wisely and document it well.
Ciao. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.